Okay, so we are going to continue with what we have. Cyber security is the course that we are going to be looking at all through our program together. And like we know, this is a professional postgraduate diploma in cyber security studies. So I will be walking us through it all through the period we'll be together. And we'll be starting with our module 1 for today, which has to do with fundamentals of cyber security. So my name is Dr. Peter Ode. I've been in the field for over 9 years now, first, second, and third degree in cyber security. And I also have done a lot across Africa and in the world when it comes to cyber security. So that is me in a nutshell. So as we progress, we'll get to know ourselves the more. So before we delve into fundamentals of cybersecurity, there's a quote I always use for most of my class. So your knowledge of cybersecurity is determined by what you understand to be the cyberspace. So the word cybersecurity is actually the security of something, which we refer to as the cyberspace. So if you don't understand the entire world, the entire concept of what the cyberspace is, then there's no need or there's no point trying to want to know what cybersecurity is. So we are going to be starting from the foundational aspect of how it got to be that today we have the word and the terminology and the practice that we refer to as cybersecurity. So remember, I've used the word the cyberspace because that is the actual broader term. That's the actual umbrella word that covers everything that we're going to be doing here. And then the security aspect of that umbrella word, cyberspace, is what we are going to be gearing ourselves into, the practical aspect of the security of the cyberspace, right? So let's move on. While we will be on this, we'll be looking at just the introduction, since our module 1 is fundamentals. So we'll be looking at the introduction, and also please always endeavor to ask questions wherever you are not clear, or whatever concept that is being used, whatever terminology that is being used that you maybe don't understand. Do not hesitate to ask questions. I always like my class to be interactive. So where we have to make it to be very interactive, ask your questions whenever you want to ask, right? Okay, so as we progress or as we proceed into it, we'll be looking at intro to cyber security. And our outline will be for us to give us a background and an overview, just like I have talked about the cyberspace. So we'll look at the concept of that cyberspace. We'll also look at some key concept and ideology around that space. Then we look at cyberspace security, otherwise referred to as what we know as the cyber security, right? So we look at it, the cyberspace security. Then we look at key principles around it, information security, and the adopted principles that are borrowed into the security of the cyberspace. They'll look at areas of cybersecurity and then several other adopted principles. Now, it will interest us to know that for the fact that we are doing cybersecurity, we all know that it was in the early or middle 2000s that the term, the whole idea around cybersecurity started making wave, right? So there have been several things that have been on before this aspect started coming up. So there are several principles that have been adopted, borrowed from different angles, and brought into what we are referring to as cybersecurity today. So for the Mark, you're welcome to class. So we have done a brief introduction of what we'll be doing. After now, the course material, this slide we are using will be dropped on the platform, so you can also go through it. We also told us that the class is going to be a very interactive one. So wherever or whatever you don't understand, you can always draw attention back to it. Whatever concept, whatever ideology we'll be using or talking about that you don't understand, always draw our attention back to it, because we believe that by the end of this whole training, at least you should be able to understand and then explain or pass down the knowledge of what cybersecurity is all about to somebody else, right? So that is why we are here. So you're welcome once again to class. So we'll proceed. So I believe this is the outline we are intending to look at today. And then we subsequently will look at other things, right? So let's move on. I have told us about the concept of the cyberspace. So if I may want to ask, although this is not a physical class, but I always like us to interact, right? What we understand by the word cyberspace. And like I told us, you can never talk about cybersecurity without understanding the cyberspace. So the cyberspace, now we look at it as the fifth world domain, right? In the military, they will look at it and they'll tell you that it is the fifth space where war can happen. The fifth area or the fifth domain where war can happen, right? Now, that's in the military term. So we will look at it as the fifth world as in W-O-R-L-D, world, right? So we always know that we have several domains as human beings. We have the air, we have the land, we have the maritime body, that's the water bodies, we have the space, right? So we look at the cyberspace as the fifth domain of existence, of human existence. And then all of the infrastructures that make that space to function, all of the activities that happens in that space, all of the things that makes that space to be a working space is what we refer to as items or assets of the cyberspace. So when we are looking at the cyberspace, we are looking at a holistic world, a holistic term that encompasses a full existence of humanity in it, right? So that is what we refer to as the cyberspace. And just like we have humanity existing on land, humanity existing on the water bodies, humanity existing on the space, humanity existing on the air, that is how we also have humanity existing on the cyberspace. Now, in this cyberspace, we have categories of assets or of things that makes it functional, right? And we have what we call the physical system, the cyber physical systems, right? All of the physical things that you make use of that allows you to interact or do what we refer to as information technology or information communication, right? Is what we refer to as physical systems. So your mast, your computers, your television, your radios, your IoT, think of it, right? We refer to that as the physical systems or the physical assets, things you can actually see and feel while you are existing in the cyberspace. Then we look at another critical aspect of these assets, and we call them cyber information. Now, information technology has been there, right? As a matter of fact, information has been there, information sciences has been there, information technology has been there. But today we have cyber information. So we are dragging in the whole idea of information that has been there into the cyberspace to make it an asset domain in the cyberspace, right? So that is another area, another aspect of the cyberspace, right? Then we have the people. And like we all know, the people, we are the most important asset domain in the cyberspace because almost everything that exists or that is working in the cyberspace does all of these things because of the people components of that space, right? And then we have cognitive actions. Cognitive actions, we refer to these as all the activities. Mind you, when we refer to as activities, we also look at the culture of the computer itself, right? Let's use the word computer. The culture of the computer, the culture of all our physical systems, the culture of we, the people that operate in the cyberspace. And that is why you see terminology like ethical this, right? Governance. You see things like compliance. All of those things are cognitive actions. We categorize them under the cognitive actions of the cyberspace. So if there are no interactions, the zero and ones are not interacting with themselves, the cyberspace, the asset domain will be useless, right? So please let us understand that the cyberspace are all the physical systems, all the information, the people, the cognitive actions that enable communication and interaction to happen, right? We refer to that as a cyberspace. So now the cyberspace is not the internet. Rather, the internet is an aspect of the cyberspace. I believe that makes sense. The cyberspace is not Google, right? Google is an aspect of the cyberspace. Is that also? So the cyberspace can be the radio frequencies that are passing between myself and you now. Because whatever is happening here, it is a transmission that is coming from my end to your end. There are a lot of processes that are involved to make this communication that I'm communicating with you now get to you. And as we progress, we are going to be seeing these steps, how they move, how things converge from the physical systems to cognitive actions, become information, and then get to you, the people, right? So we are going to be seeing this, and that is why you see in this diagram, we have something like a spiral. All of these things work together to enable the functioning of the cyberspace. Now, what I have said here, or what I'm giving us here, you're not going to get it from any material or from anywhere, but this is based on research. This is based on what we understand as what the cyberspace is. Now, you can go to some materials to tell you that the cyberspace are all the computers that enables you to communicate and share resources. That is actually part of our definition here. You can go to some place that cyberspace is an all-encompassing domain that allows interaction to happen. Yes, it is accepted. That is also part of our definition. But like I said from the beginning, your understanding and level of how you understand cybersecurity to be will be determined by what you understand as the cyberspace. Some people understand the cyberspace to be limited to only the internet. Some see it as the World Wide Web. Some see a robot as a cyberspace, right? And that is why their knowledge of cybersecurity will be limited to only that thing that they understand the cyberspace as. But as a cybersecurity expert, you can work in the space. You can work in the air. You can work in the maritime, right? That's the water bodies. That is because you have understood that, okay, there can be cybersecurity in this area of the cyberspace. And that is why we allow us to understand the term, the umbrella word, before we delve into the security of this umbrella word. So the umbrella word that we are looking at is not just limited to IT infrastructures in our organization. It is not just limited to our mobile devices. It is not just limited to the internet where you browse, right? It is actually an all-encompassing, full-fledged domain that all the activities that happen in every other domains of the world can also happen there. War are being fought today in the cyberspace. People date themselves today in the cyberspace, just like somebody can ask somebody out and get into marriage with the person physically. That is how it can also happen in the cyberspace. In fact, there are a lot of things that happens in the cyberspace. So every other thing that can happen in every other part of the world domain can also happen in the cyberspace. And that is why in our diagram, if you look at it, we look at the cyberspace and we cut it across every other domain. So it's whether you are in the space, whether you are in the air, whether you are in the land, whether you are in the water body, that's the maritime, there are still components of the cyberspace in all of those places. So it is for you, whatever you're going to be learning, is for you to now decide which niche or where you're going to build your niche around, right? I know most of us want to build our niche around the land, right? Based on we use our computers, we use our phones and all of those things, right? So as we progress to understand what cybersecurity is, let us always know that there is first of all the concepts of the cyberspace. And like I said, your knowledge of cybersecurity is dependent on what you understand to be the cyberspace. Okay, so I have a slide here, and I wanted to play it. I'll just go ahead and see if that slide can still play. Now, I'll explain this because it gives us, or it tells us, why cyberspace, or why the cybersecurity, or why do you think that anything, why will humans just decide to create a new space for themselves and refer to it as the cyberspace, right? So let's look at this video.
Global cybercrime damage is predicted to hit $10.5 trillion annually by 2025. If it were measured as a country, then cybercrime, which is predicted to inflict damages totaling $8 trillion globally in 2023, would be the world's third largest economy after the US and China. This represents the greatest transfer of economic wealth in history, risks the incentives for innovation and investment, is exponentially larger than the damage inflicted from natural disasters in a year, and will be more profitable than the global trade of all major illegal drugs combined. To learn more about our facts, figures, and predictions, go to Cybersecurity Venture.
Okay, so now I decided to play this video so that we understand what we are actually looking at. There's an aspect of things that happen in the cyberspace that we refer to as cybercrime. Now, we are not looking at cyber attacks. We are looking at cybercrime. Cybercrime is an aspect of the type of malicious activities that can happen in the cyberspace. So cybercrime as it is, from what we have read, or from cybersecurityventures.com, the statistics we have is that cybercrime alone is worth more than $10.5 trillion in a year. That is to say, it is the third world economy, right? Aside from US and China, cybercrime, what cyber criminals alone steal from the world, makes cybercrime the third world largest economy, right? And also, if you combine all the illegal form of transactions that happen in the world, whatever income or whatever fund is being used, it is not up to what cybercrime can give to people. Recently in Nigeria, I think about 2-3 weeks ago, if some of us, I don't know, we heard of a scam called CBEX, right? If those of us that are ears are to the ground, you heard of a scam called CBEX. And what they said was that the scammers made away with about 1.2 trillion naira, that's almost 800,000 US dollars from Nigerians, just within Nigeria. Imagine what scammers could pull out, right? So imagine what is happening to other countries when it comes to the activities that happens in the cyberspace, when it comes to the malicious activities that happens in the cyberspace. So cybercrime, which is just an aspect of malicious activities that happens in the cyberspace, is the world third economy. Imagine if you are putting all forms of malicious activities that happens in the cyberspace, put all of them together. Imagine what it will yield, right? So when we are looking at the cyberspace and cybersecurity, we imagine it to be that is where the world is going. That is where the world is going, or that is where the world is as we are talking. So if you are not, or you don't have at least the foundational knowledge of what cybersecurity is, then you have yourself to blame, right? And if you look at this, you can also see that the other side of my slide is showing you offline and online and offline and online, right? Now, if you look at it, at times some of us will say, okay, why do I even need cybersecurity? Maybe is it not my duties, or what I do on daily is always offline. I don't do online stuff. My dear, what we are talking about here is not something about whether you are offline or online. It encompasses all aspects. So whether you are offline, whether you are online, you are also participating or actively existing in the cyberspace, right? Today, I don't think there's anybody here that will tell us that they are not making use of bank transfer, or they don't operate a bank, or they don't operate a mobile device, or even if you don't operate, at least there are some things that the government do, and they bring you purposely into the cyberspace. So humanity as it is today, almost all the activities we do exists in the cyberspace. And that is one of the need, or why we need to understand the general concept of the cyberspace. Now, I'm taking my time to explain this so that as we progress through, all that we'll be doing, we can easily, understand or always draw ourselves back to the general concepts, right? So now, if you look at the cyberspace, we have not yet moved into cybersecurity, actually. We are still looking at the concept of the cyberspace, right? So if you look at it, the most important thing in that cyberspace is what we refer to as assets, right? Asset is anything that is of value to you. Is that not so? I believe that is so, right? So anything that is of value to you, we refer to it as an asset. So like all of the things we have mentioned, whether you are talking of the people, whether you're talking of the infrastructure, the physical systems, whether you're talking of the cognitive actions, whether you're talking of the information, the data, whatever it is you're talking about, in the cyberspace, whatever it is we are talking about that is of value, that is making that space to function, is what we refer to as assets, right? So assets is quite broad. And that is why from the beginning, I told us that we have several asset domains. If we look at the people assets domain, we can actually break it down. We can break it down to ethics. We can break it down to governance. We can break it down to compliance. We can break it down to risk management and all whatnot, data governance and all whatnot. It's about the people, right? When we talk of actions, the cognitive action asset, where you say somebody has hacked your network, right? There's a malware moving in your network. What that thing is trying to do is it's trying to distort the actual working of a particular action in your entire cyberspace, right? So that is that asset domain. So we can break it down into network, we can break it down into your radio frequencies, somebody can jam it, right? So those are actions, your binary codes in your system, your kernel, somebody can hack into it using rootkits and then distort your kernel, right? It happened last year to Microsoft, whereby most of us using Microsoft systems, you just woke up and you try booting up your system, you see that it is showing you a blue screen. They call it BSOD attack on Microsoft. I think Microsoft lost about $73 million last year from that attack. Okay, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you very much. We are enjoying your lecture, Dr. Ode. There's someone that has just asked to join. It's a new student and he's just coming in today. So I think we should accept her so that she can just be part of the lectures.
Okay, thank you. Let me do that in a while. Okay, I think the person has been accepted, so maybe the person was kicked out or something due to network or so.
That is one Princess Victoria. She should be.
Okay. I think nobody is in the waiting room. So, but whenever she comes in, I'll definitely have to accept her.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, sir. So, you permit me, I actually decided to put on my camera at first, but you permit me so that I manage the network so that we don't have a flux in our class, please. Okay, so let's go ahead. So like I was saying, assets is very key. For instance, as we all are, our assets or anything that is of value to us is what we call our assets. So to you, a child can be of value to you, your car can be of value to you, your infrastructure can be of value to you, your computer system in the house can be of value to you. They are all your assets. But in the cyberspace have specific assets that are tied to it. You and me, for instance, we are all specific and important assets in the cyberspace. So, like I told us before, without us in that space, nothing happens, right? So I also told us that information, cyber information. Now, when we move in and we are dealing on information, we'll break them down from data and then move into intelligence, right? But let's use the general word information for them. Cyber information also are of assets. And that is why you see some materials will tell you that data is the oil of the cyberspace, right? Because your data that leads to information, that leads to intelligence, is what holds all the information about you as a person, right? So asset is actually the bigger boy when it comes to the cyberspace. And mind you, that is what every other person is interested in. Nobody is interested in any other thing aside your assets, aside the assets in the cyberspace. And if you don't understand the type of asset that you own or have in the cyberspace, then you will not know this type of security. You see, we have to start from somewhere before we get to that point where we refer to as cyber security. So cyber asset is first. You have to think of it, know and measure the type of cyber asset that you own or that you have, right? And then when you have discovered or determined the type of asset that you have, you need to know what weaknesses, what are the vulnerabilities of my asset, right? What are the vulnerabilities? Now, remember, I'm explaining the concept around the cyberspace, right? So what are the weaknesses? What are the loopholes that my asset has? For instance, if I have a son, for instance, and I hold him very dear, right? And my son, since I hold him very dear, I buy an iPad for him to be using, right? But with this iPad, I don't put any control in that iPad. It means the value I am having under my son, I don't understand the type of things that he has that is also of value to him, because he will definitely use that iPad, access the internet. He can be cyberbullied. He can be cyber stalked, right? Cyberbullied when somebody is bullying you over the cyberspace. Like I told us, almost all the activities that happen in our physical space also replicates itself. Even more happens in the cyberspace, right? So definitely, if I have to buy an iPad for my son, I have to know how to protect him from every form of, threats, right? Because I know he has a weakness. The weakness is that he must visit a particular website, or he must use his iPad to access what he's not supposed to access, or for the fact that I have to give him an asset alone. That is a vulnerability. So a vulnerability is a weakness in a system. That is why those of us that are fathers, you remember those days, the way we used to handle children are different from the way we handle children these days. Right? Those days, who buys you an iPad? Nobody. Okay, Her Excellency, thank you for joining. Thank you for muting your mic too. So you're welcome. We are looking at the general concept around the cyberspace before we delve into cyber security proper, right? So let's take note. I have defined asset. I say anything that is of value, anything that is of importance to us as it concerns the cyberspace. We can also look at it as anything that is of importance to the cyberspace. We have also looked at vulnerabilities, and we see every loophole, every weakness in an asset. So every asset has a weakness. There's nobody here that will say that we don't have our weaknesses. We all have our weaknesses. So if we who are created by God have weaknesses, right? So imagine what is created by a weaker person, right? So every asset, everything that is of importance have a weakness, have a vulnerability. And that is why there's always that term, there's no absolute security anywhere, right? Because everybody has a weakness. Okay. So everybody has a weakness, just like I've said, and it talks about our assets, right? Then we move to threats. So threats are those things that have the potentials of causing harm, right? anything that has the potentials of causing harm, we refer to them as threats. Anything that has the potential of causing harm. So every human being is a threat. Is that also? That is why they also tell us that the moment you make use of even a phone, you become exposed to cyber criminals. So even the internet is a threat to you. Even your phone is a threat to you, right? Anything that has the potential, somebody can go through it or pass through it to cause harm. We refer to it as a threat, right? A threat might not be something that is bad or dangerous. A threat can be something that is good, right? But since everybody has weaknesses, this threat can manifest. So when there's a manifestation of this threat, we refer to them as attack. So an attack is the action or are the actions carried out by a threat, right? The actions carried out by a threat. Or you can say an attack is the actual threat carrying out an action. When a threat carries out, now it has moved from being potential, right, to physics will say being kinetic, right? So it has moved from being in a stationary point to actually carrying out an action, right? So that is why you see most times some people use those words interchangeably, threats and attacks, right? You hear threat landscape, you hear attack landscape, you hear them. Sometimes people use threats/attacks, right? Side by side. So threats is the potential. This person has the potential, but it has not carried out the attack, right? Or the harm. But attacks is when the threat carries out that harm, right? So in attacks, there is an action. In threats, there's the potential of carrying out that action, right? So when you have determined all of these things, right, before you now move into cybersecurity, which are like the controls you put in place, right, you must conduct what we call risk analysis, right? So risk can be the probability that something bad will happen, the probability that a threat will carry out an attack. Take it that way. The probability or the possibility that a threat will carry out an attack, we refer to it as risk. Like I told us, whatever you don't understand, you can always draw us back. Now, all of these terminologies we have looked here, all these concepts we have looked here, is something that has to be at the tip of our fingers, because these things that we have discussed here is what we are going to be turning around as we are looking at cyber security, right? So when you have done the risk analysis, you are analyzing to know which threat can possibly carry out what attack, right? What type of action will a threat wants to pull? If myself and Mark, we are together sitting in the same place, when I want to do risk analysis, I want to check what possible harm can Mark cause on me. Because the fact that myself and Mark is sitting, we are both threats to each other. But for the fact that we have not carried out any attack on each other, it means we are just at the level of being potential threats to each other, right? Or potential items that can cause harm to each other. But what are the possible type of harm that Mark might cause on me? I might turn my back and Mike strikes me, right? Or with a slap. That is now an attack because he has the potential, he has the hand, he has the willpower, he has the physique, he can move his body, he has that's all the features that can make him carry out an attack on me, right? So at that point in time where we are stationary, these attacks have not been carried out yet, we refer to it as threats. But when the attacks are carried out, it becomes an attack. So analysis, you're analyzing to know what threat or what possible attack can a particular threat carry out, right? And then when you have done all of these things, that is when you now look at what are the possible control measures you can put in place, right? So these control measures is what we refer to as cyber security. So, like I told us, we will be looking at cyber security as we move, right? As we move throughout our stay here. But I believe with the explanation of all I've explained, you should know that cybersecurity are those control measures, those mechanisms, those things you do or put in place in order to safeguard or protect your assets, right? Now, there are 1,000,001 definitions out there, but the understanding of what we are talking about or what I have just said is what cybersecurity is. So you can cram any kind of definition and put anywhere, but just know that anything you are doing to protect your assets in the cyberspace or anything you are doing to protect your cyber assets is what we refer to as cybersecurity. Now, the things you do to protect your cyber assets are quite very broad and very big that you cannot even think of putting all of them in one day. You cannot even think of doing all of these things, even in a year, right? But at least you can measure to a level that, okay, this is what cybersecurity is. Because, and just like I said, there's no absolute security. As you keep doing or putting measures in place in the organization, that is how attackers also try to bring in new strategies of trying to, carry out these malicious actions on your assets. So I would ask us this question now. What is cybersecurity? Who can just tell us, based on the explanation I've given us? I don't know if anybody can just tell us what they understand as cybersecurity. Anybody? Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Lecturer. Though I am actually working in the office while I'm still listening, but from what I can get in respect of the meaning of cybersecurity, it actually involves those controls that you put in place in order to mitigate any threat or any potential threat or attack that may affect your assets. I think in a very nutshell, that is what I understand.
Yes.
By cybersecurity.
Yes, thank you so very much, Doc. I think that is actually what it is. So anything, because when we say controls, normally as we progress, we will look at them because we have technical terminologies, organizational terminologies, governance terminologies when we are looking at this, the definition of cyber security. So we say controls. When we say controls, most times we are looking at technically what you put in place, the controls you are putting in place, right? So we can look at organizationally, we can say, okay, the type of document, the type of regulations, the type of actions you are taking, right, to safeguard these things, right? Some people look at it as policies, as documents you must have put, rules and regulations that you must have put in place to safeguard this asset. So that's why we are always keen about letting us know that in cybersecurity, when you are looking at cyber, always know that there is a technical cybersecurity and there is a non-technical cybersecurity, right? So, and that is why we don't tell you that, okay, you must be a science student or you must be a guru in mathematics before you do cybersecurity. No. Whether from any aspect of life, you can actually comfortably come into cybersecurity and then do well in the field. Because in our controls in cybersecurity, they span across several domains. They span across regulations. There are some of us that are good in coming up with rules and regulations. There are some of us that are good in coming up with principles on how to do things. There are some of us that are good in technical stuff like installing antivirus, fixing computers. There are some of us that are good in culture, right? Trying to make people to be aware of the do's and the don'ts. All of these things put together are security measures, are mechanisms, are controls we put in place to safeguard our cyber assets, right? Just like you have a car. Let's say you have a golf car. There are a lot of things you do to protect that car. Some of us use keys. There's nobody that will buy a car that will not want to lock their doors, that will not want to put a windscreen or a windshield, right? There's nobody that wants to buy a car and just park it anywhere on the road and then leave it there and go unlocked, right? So all the things you are doing to safeguard that car is the security we are talking about now. So move it to the cyberspace. So all the things we do to protect our cyber assets are what we refer to as cyber security. So while we progress in this course, what we'll be learning are those things, whether you want to look at them from regulatory angle, from governance angle, from technical perspective, from whatsoever perspective you want to look at it from, right? All of the things we will put together to achieve the security of this asset are what we are going to be doing all through our program, because that is what cybersecurity is. That is what cybersecurity is. So like I explained earlier, I told us that in our assets domain, like I told us, please always know that anything cybersecurity, the first thing that should come to your mind is what assets are we trying to protect? What cyber assets are you trying to protect? Anytime you hear the word cybersecurity, always think of what cyber assets am I trying to secure? Cybersecurity does not operate on its own, right? And that is why when somebody say robotics or robots is not in the cyber, is not an activity of the cyberspace, we tend to laugh, because this is a new domain that almost all the things you think of, whether AI, whether IoT, or whether smart city, all operate in this space, right? Although we tend to want to draw out cybersecurity to be only the ones you do when you are looking at networks or information. No, we look at it holistically. Every form of security, whether IoT security, whether internet security, whether information security, in as much as there's the component of IT infrastructure in it, right? We refer to it as the cyber security. So you can decide to move yourself and become a network security expert, an information security expert, a cloud security expert, an IoT security expert, whatever form of security, in as much as they play around this whole concept of what we have explained, as a cyberspace, you can comfortably fit in and comfortably have a job role there. And that is why when people say, what is it? AI is coming to take over the job role of man. We in this space or in this field, we tend to laugh, because there are several things. The people component cannot be undone in the cyberspace. And that is why we don't quake, we don't shake whenever, whatever form of AI is being developed or whatever, because even the AI needs security, and you are to provide the security of the AI, right? So as a cybersecurity expert or as a professional in the cybersecurity field, you don't have any cause to worry, because the controls keep growing on daily basis. Rules and regulations keep coming. You can make rules for an AI that is developed yesterday. You can come up with rules and regulations on how that AI should function, and it can be adopted and accepted in the entire world on how that AI should function. That is cybersecurity. You can decide to say, okay, for an AI or for a robot to be able to move from this country to another country, they must follow these rules, it must do this, it must be tested like this. So all of those things are things that you now, as a professional in the field, can also put in place as a control measure in cybersecurity. And that is why, as we are progressing, you see we'll move from understanding all of these concepts into moving to what we refer to as governance, risks, and compliance standards. We'll look at regulations, look at several frameworks that have come up to help safeguard some of the things that we have been doing, right? So while we are looking at cybersecurity as what we'll be doing for the entire period, there is actually a key asset that we want us to hit on the more. And that key asset is the cyber information that we talked about earlier. So we can look at it as either cyber data, cyber information, or cyber intelligence. And now why I decided to put these three items here for us is because they are actually the same. They are all the same things, right? But appearing in different levels. Now, aside from the people assets, the information asset tends to be one of the important, almost important, other assets domain in the cyberspace. The information assets domain can fall back to become data and can move up to become intelligence. That's to say, when we look at information, we know that information has been there time immemorial, even before the whole technology of information started coming. Information has been there, even by the time they were building the Tower of Babel, it was because they were able to communicate, share information. Information has been there even from the onset of humanity. Because of communication, information has been there. People communicate information and the like. I think one of the first technology in information was used during Julius Caesar's days, right? Julius Caesar was then, I think, an emperor then. So whenever he wants to communicate with his allies, he uses a particular pattern of communication. And that is what we refer to as ciphers, right? He uses what we call the Caesar cipher. Julius Caesar, Caesar's cipher. Cipher is spelled C-I-P-H-E-R. C-I-P-H-E-R, cipher. So Caesar, C-E-A-S-E-R, Caesar cipher. Now, that is what Caesar normally uses for communication. So how does he use the Caesar cipher? He uses the Greek alphabet and then the Roman numerals, right? So he will adopt a number. Let's say he adopts number 4. Then he will look at the alphabet. Let's say the alphabet is A, B, C, D. So he can decide to choose D. D to represent, when we say number 4, it means D will represent A, because D is the 4th alphabet, right? D is the 4th alphabet. So what he will do is, if he wants to write A, he can use D to replace that. If he wants to write B, he can use E to replace that. So if I am to communicate with Dr. Wale now, I can decide to say, okay, whenever we want to communicate, our key is going to be number 4. So anytime I write a letter to Dr. Wale, I'll write D, E, D. That's to say I've spelled ABA, which is about right. I've spelled ABA. I'll also write D, E, D. Then I'll write other things and then send to Dr. Wale. Dr. Wale, which we have already established for, he will just count backward and say, okay, this D stands for A. He will just transcribe that information, right? Now, that is information technology. That is where the whole idea, if you want to handle information, right? That's where the whole idea of information technology started, until it now manifested during the world wars, right? Manifested during the world wars, whereby people started using different forms of means and techniques to communicate information to their allies, right? So information technology started from there up to this point that we are today. And today now, information technology has been incorporated into the cyberspace, because the cyberspace also works with information. Information are also being transmitted over the cyberspace. And that is why in a different climate, or a different school of thought, we will look at information technology or information security as an aspect of cyber security. And then in another school of thought, we'll look at information security as an umbrella term of its own, because information, even before the concept and idea around the cyberspace manifested or came into reality, information security has already been there, right? So when you are looking at those physical manual aspect of information security, you can see information security stands alone, right? But when we are in the cyberspace, just like we also established that today, we are in the cyberspace, information security is also part of the cyberspace. And that is where terminologies or ideologies like cryptography has been brought into the cyberspace, into cybersecurity. And today, if you are learning cybersecurity, there will be a point where we'll have to look at cryptography. That's where you see things like identity and access management coming in, because you have to prove your identity before you gain an access to a particular assets, right? Or all of these things now are coming from, you know, different background. Like identity and access management is coming from both physical security, which is our conventional security, and then our information security. So we are drawing things from different levels, different part of life, livelihood, or humanity, and bringing it into the cyberspace, because the cyberspace is a world of its own. Now, information, as we are looking at it, using the word information, I can decide to use the word intelligence. But now when I use the word intelligence, you will know that intelligence is information at a higher level, right? Why data will be information at a lower level, right? So we look at information and we refer to it as a processed fact, right? As a factual item, a factual data, a factual thing, something that has meaning, something that can educate you, that can give you, add knowledge to you, right? That is information. Anything that with it you can gain a knowledge. So information adds knowledge to you. That is what information is. So we look at it as a processed fact, a fact that with it you are knowledgeable about a particular thing. That is what information is. So when we look at it in the cyberspace, we look at it as something that with you having access to it, you have a complete knowledge of a particular thing, right? That is information. But data, why I say data is a lower aspect? It's a lower aspect because with data is unprocessed. But when it is correlated, like in large quantity, it becomes information, right? But data is unprocessed fact. Something that when looking at it, you might not really gain knowledge, except to deep further into wanting to understand more of what it is, right? So that is what data actually is. Know that data does not give you an actual sense of the entire thing that you need to know, right? Then intelligence is a sensible information. A sensible information. Now, you are not even supposed to possess this amount of information, but because there have been several correlations, and this information has been given to, and it has been proven beyond reasonable doubt that this information is fact, right? Yeah, it has been proven by Mr. A, it has been proven by Mr. B, it has been proven by several, mechanisms, and has been tested by several mechanisms, and there is no two ways about it, about that fact. It becomes intelligence, right? So let's go back. If we start from data, data is an unprocessed fact. And also data at one point can be information. I take that again. Data, like we said, is an unprocessed fact, but at one point it can be an information. Now, example, the name Peter. Peter, if you call me Peter, it's because you know that I'm Peter and I'm going to respond that I am Peter. So at that point in time, my Peter is an information to you. You know that I am Peter. It's a knowledge that you have acquired, and you know that I am Peter, and you call Peter, and you know I'm going to respond. But imagine you don't even know that I am Peter, and you just see Peter. Or we are 20 Peters. Peter Ode, Peter Michael, Peter Daniel, Peter Dad, and you just call Peter. You know that nobody will answer you because it's useless. It's as empty as there's no fact to it. There's no proof to it that the Peter you are referring to is Peter Ode. So at that point in time, when that data does not make any sense, it is a data, right? But at the point where Peter makes sense, right, it becomes information. That's why we say at one point, data can be information. At another point, information can be data, right? So I take another example. If we are together in a class and we say, okay, there are 4 John in the class, and you just come and say, John, definitely nobody responds to you, or all the John will look at you, right? Or all the John will respond. So at that point in time, nobody, even other people in the class, will not know whether you are referring to John Jude, or John James, or John Peter, or John Thomas. Nobody knows, because he just said John. But the moment you come to class and say John Jude, everybody knows that you are actually talking about John Jude. And if John Jude does not answer, and the class will say, John Jude, they are talking to you, right? Because the name John Jude passes an information to the entire class. But when you just come and say John, the whole class will even ask you, which of the John are you talking about? So at one point, that John can mean something, can give the knowledge of a particular person to all of you in the class. And at another point, that John might not mean anything. And that is why, no matter how useless that information is, or that data is, now it is data, so we believe it is useless, it does not have any meaning. So no matter how useless that data is, right, know that data can lead to intelligence. And the moment somebody has an intelligence about you, the person can do whatever he wants to do with you. For instance, if the DSS wants to pick, let me not say doc now. Let's say, okay, let me use myself. So if DSS wants to come and pick Dr. Peter now, they don't need to stress themselves, start trailing, or they know where I am, they know where you are, right? Because they have intelligence about you, right? Now, how was this intelligence gathered? They have gathered data from different sources. So they have been able to gather data from your bank. They have been able to gather data from your network service providers. They have been able to gather data from your GPS. You know, your phone has a GPS, or a, what is it called? What is it called? Your Google locator now, your location tracker. So all of this information, they have tools that correlate and gather data from all of this place. Now, maybe the information they are gathering about from your location is just geolocation, how you move, right? The information they gather from your bank is how you do transactions, who you are connected to. The information they gather from your service provider, how much you have recharged, what is the name you use in registering, how many people you have called. All of this information, they will gather them and we do what we call correlation and aggregation. Pick what is important to them. And at that point, or with those information, or with those data now, that has now become information, they know that it becomes an intelligence to them. And that's why we refer to them as intelligence agencies, right? Intelligence agencies, because they don't just deal with information, they correlate information through data from every source and decipher or get out intelligence from it. So why we are taking time to explain this is, no matter how you think your data is useless, right, you have to protect it. So data as simple as your name has to be protected, your gender, your whatever. So as a cybersecurity professional at the end of this class, you should have that hygiene of protection. You should have that culture of wanting to protect things that are your assets, things that are your cyber assets, your data, your information, your name, your all whatnot, right? You should, at a particular level, be able to protect these things, right? So data, information, and intelligence, this is a key asset. We will not want to delve, we have talked about the people, and we'll still talk about the people, and then we have talked about the information, cyber information asset domain. Now, these are the two most important domains. It is not the physical, right? Our asset domain, it is not the physical system that is very important to us, right? It is not the cognitive actions, right? But like I said, the people and the information. The people and the information. Okay. I believe we can still hear me clearly.
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, so please, if you are joining the class, you can just help us always mute your mic so that it doesn't distort flow of knowledge. Okay, so let's proceed. Your data is very important, no matter how useless you think they are, because it can lead to intelligence about you. It can lead to intelligence about you, right? So if somebody asks you, why is data protection important? It is because data can lead to intelligence. And the moment somebody gets even up to the level of intelligence about you, you're as good as finished. As a matter of fact, if somebody gets to the level of having information, knowledgeable about all the things you do, at that level alone, you are even finished, let alone getting to the intelligence level, right? So at all points, the information asset domain is very important. So after the people asset domain, the next is the information asset domain. We have the physical asset domain, the physical systems asset domain, our infrastructure, your computer, your whatever. All of those things are there. Why I said these other two are more important is because any attack against them can lead to something higher, can lead to reputational damage, can lead to loss of life, right? But when somebody steals your laptop or affects anything that has to do with your physical asset domain, you can always replace it. You can always buy a new one. Is that not so? So these two, the people and the information asset, are key in terms of asset domain. And that is why you see some people becoming expert in information security. You see some people always, when they talk of cyber security, what everybody wants to look at is information security. InfoSec, InfoSec, InfoSec. So it is an item under cyber security, right? So let's look at the drivers in the cyberspace. What are the things that makes this cyberspace functional, right? What are the things that makes this cyberspace functional, right? So without these guys that we are talking about now, or without your knowledge on these guys, you will not be able to do cybersecurity. Whether you are coming from arts background, whether you're coming from social arts, social science, sciences, or whatever background, without your knowledge on these three drivers and technologies, you will not be able to operate seamlessly on the cyberspace. You will not be able to understand what cybersecurity is. Just know that. So the first one are the operations and activities that happen in the cyberspace. The operations and activities that happens in the cyberspace. Otherwise, we refer to as you having a knowledge of operating systems. So we look at operating systems as all the operations and the activities that happens in the cyberspace. I know in our basic definition, they'll tell you that operating systems are those set of instructions that tells the computer system what to do, right? Basic definition. But at this advanced level, we are not looking at that in that basic computer science definition. We are looking at it as the activities, the operations, the set of instructions, because even the set of instructions is somebody that gives them, right? So all of those activities, whether it's being given by humans, whether it's being given by programs, whether it's being given by whatever, all of the operations and activities that happens in the cyberspace, we refer to it as the operating system of the cyberspace. For instance, if we look at LAN as a domain, the operation that happens on LAN, we sleep, we wake up, we eat, we bathe, we go to work, we come back, all of these are activities. Now, you know, instructions have been given, rules and regulations are there, policies are there for us to follow in our day-to-day action, in our day-to-day activities, right? So you don't just go to work and your work is supposed to be for you to sign papers and you go there and start digging the ground, right? Because that is not the instructions that you have been given. That's not the activities that you are made to do or perform in that place, right? So you have your own operations, right? Physically now, we all have several operations that we do. Or let's use our digestive system. The digestive system cannot go and be thinking like the brain, because that is not the operation of the digestive system, right? Its duty is to digest food. You go from the mouth through saliva, through the esophagus, to the stomach, to the small intestine, to the large intestine, to the colon, then you to the anus, right? So it has its operation. That is a flow, right? And that is also how we have a flow in the cyberspace. And these flows are what we refer to as operating systems. So as a cybersecurity professional, you must understand what operating systems are, right? You must also know how to secure operating systems. And as a cybersecurity professional, Windows operating system is let me not use the word useless, is the most, how do I put it? Let me not use the word, let me use this word, quackest. When you talk of quack, the most quack operating system to ever use as a cybersecurity professional is your Windows operating system. Now, why am I saying this? Is because the Windows is somebody's business. It's just like Dr. Wale now decides to build an operating system and put it out there for his business, and people start buying it. He owns the operating system. So there's nothing you do in that operating system that Dr. Wale does not know about. There's nothing you do that does not know about, right? So he owns the operating system. So imagine if we are 200 million people in Nigeria and let's say 100 million are using Windows operating system. It means the owner, which is Microsoft now, have access to all of us. So it means we are in a kind of a network, or a kind of his network, right? Because we are actually making use of the Windows operating system. And since he is the owner, he built it for the purpose of marketing. What he just did was to have introduced what we call the graphical user interface. You see the way we are using Windows seamlessly. I drag and drop, I click and open, I click this one, it happens, I do all of it. So he just decided to modify the Windows operating system to give us what we refer to as the graphical user interface based operating system, and then sells it out, and then we are always buying. And I believe it is those of us in Africa that are using these operating systems the most. Every other country or every other continent, most times they do a customized operating system that leverages on Linux kernel, right? But the world believes that Africans are lazy people. So we don't want to always get our hands dirty. Normally, an operating system is supposed to be a black screen where you will be typing, right? A black screen where you'll be, typing things. I want to open a PowerPoint slide. I have to type in code. The PowerPoint slides come up. I want to do this meeting. I have to type in code. This meeting comes up and all whatnot. That is how an operating system is supposed to be. So what we are just doing here is just like somebody built a kind of, adds a picture, or somebody adding a picture to that code that we are supposed to be typing, and then all of those actions, he coded them into that picture. So we will just come, click on document, it takes us to document, click on this, it takes us to this, click on that, it takes us to, all of these things. So if we are doing a practical class now, you see how to access all of these things. So instead of you using your clicking, you just go to your command prompt and you start doing these things. So what Microsoft did was to go to command prompt, then reprogram these things, these actions into graphics, and then we are using that, right? So we in Africa, we are the ones making use of this product the most. Now, the operating system that is keen or that is very important for every cybersecurity expert is the Linux, any operating system that is Linux kernel based. Linux is spelled L-I-N-U-X, X for Xmas, X for xylophone, X, L-I-N-U-X, right? So the Linux kernel is a kernel, actually. Now, what is a kernel? A kernel is like the smallest unit of life of an operating system. It's also a code, right? It's also a code. Just like we have cells. We look at cell as the smallest unit of life of a human being, right? So kernel are the smallest unit of life of the operating system. So it's actually a code, a tiny midget code, right? So every other program is built towards that code. Just for instance, let's assume those of us, some wristwatches that has a small battery inside of it. I believe we all have seen those tiny little batteries inside our wristwatches, right? So without those batteries, let's assume without those batteries, you know that your wristwatches will not work, no matter how golden, no matter how many millions of dollars you use in buying those wristwatches. Without that tiny little battery, those that might not work. Is that not so? Are we together here?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So imagine everything that is built in that your $100 or $1 million wristwatch is actually being triggered by that tiny little battery. So we can liken that battery to be our kernel, right? We can liken that battery to be our kernel. Then every other thing is built around that kernel. So okay. I can decide to build a Rolex wristwatch around that small battery. I can decide to build a Dolce wristwatch around that small battery. I can decide to build an Adidas wristwatch around that small battery. The life of that wristwatch is that battery, right? So that is what the kernel is like in our operating system. Every operating system has its kernel. Windows has its kernel, which is the DOS, right? The MS-DOS. Remember, that is what Windows built in 1973 for IBM, right? It built an MS-DOS, that black screen. Those of us that use computer those days, remember you were using a black screen, right? That is the MS-DOS. So this what was his name? Bill Gates, right? He was the one that built that kernel for IBM then. But since the agreement wasn't written, he had to now remodify the DOS to become what we have as Windows today. So the Windows also has a kernel, right? But that kernel is just for Windows operating systems only. Windows servers, Windows client, Windows kernel. But Linux-based kernel is open source, right? Now, I told us any term we are using that we don't understand, let us please ask questions, right? Now, Linux kernel is open source. Linux was derived from Unix. I believe some of us have heard of Unix operating system. So Unix is a company that work with top technology firms like NASA. You know, they build machines for all these big boys like NASA and the rest that goes to space. So there was a staff that was working with them. His name was Linus Torvald. Linus, that was his name, his first name, Linus. So Linus was the one that picked the Unix kernel and modifies it and then makes it to be open for anybody that wants to use it, right? So that is why we refer to as the Linux kernel as an open source kernel. It is open for everybody to make use of it. You cannot get the Unix kernel. But Linus was working with Unix. He picks the Unix kernel, modifies the program, and then put it out and calls it Linux, Linux, Linux. So today, what we have is several organizations picking that kernel that Linus Torvald has put out and then remodifying them and building an operating system around it. So today we have operating systems such as Ubuntu. I believe some of us have heard of that word, Ubuntu, right? Ubuntu is a Linux-based operating system. That's to say, somebody picked Linux kernel and then built this operating system around it, right? We also have Kali, operating system known as Kali, right? So somebody also built, picked the Linux kernel and now built an operating system around it and calls it Kali. We also have numerous of them: Backbox, Parrots, Remnox. Think of it. As a matter of fact, some organization will just pick it and then build it into a firewall for themselves because it's a kernel. It's just like a battery, like I said. So people pick it and build whatever they want to build around it. There are people that have picked that battery, just like I made mention of that tiny little battery, and build something like a phone and put that battery in it. There will be someone that will pick something like an ATM, build something like APM, put that battery in it. So that Linux kernel is what people have been building different types of operating systems around. So like we have told us, that operating system that is Linux-based is the most secured type of operating system for any cybersecurity professional. For any cybersecurity professional, the operating system you should be using a Linux-based operating system. So as we progress, hopefully we'll get our hands on these operating systems and look at how they are, right? So, and I know we have our iOS, also that's somebody's business, even though iOS promises us security, but your security is in somebody's hand, right? The owner still owns your security. So even though they promise you security, they still have access to those information. Their iCloud or whatever has access to those information, right? Windows is only for ease of use. It does not consider security. So whatever you're doing with your Windows machine is exposed and open to anybody that can hack it, right? But Linux is secure because it has security contributions from different persons. Mr. Wale can pick Linux kernel and add a security, build a security around it. Father Mark can pick one and build a security around it. So Mr. Wale will not know the security that Father Mark has added. Both of you will not know the security that myself I have added. So all of us, our security are just been added to it. So it has a security from different contributors, and as such, becomes the most secured operating system. So you must know how to use that operating system. There's no cybersecurity expert, there's no hacker out there or any professional expert out there that uses Windows to want to carry out cybersecurity activities, right? So you must have at least 3 knowledge of operating system. We all have knowledge of operating system of our Windows. Some of us have iOS, right? Yeah, so, and then Linux-based kernel, right? Now, I've told us drivers and technologies, things that you must know to be able to operate seamlessly in the cyberspace or to be able to do cybersecurity. You must know how multiple operating systems work, right? So maybe at the end of the class, some of us will have to start on installing our Windows machine and then installing Linux operating system, because that is what you should be using as a professional, right? Then the next thing we should know is what we refer to as networks. Networks allow for interactions, right? You must know what networking is. You must know how network works. Some persons don't want to know all of this things. They just want to jump into understanding or knowing cybersecurity. So it doesn't work that way. We must know what networks are and how network works, right? Now, what is networking? Networking can be seen as when 2 or more computer systems come together to share resources and interact, right? That is what networking is all about. When 2 or more computers come together to interact or share resources, right? That is what we refer to as networking. When 2 or more computers come together to interact or share resources, we refer to it as networking. Okay, so I just had to join with another device. I think the one I'm using will soon log me out. So I have to join with another. So in case. Okay, so let's proceed. Now, two or more devices coming together to share resources. There are a lot of technology around it. There are technology that allows interactions. There are technology that allows for communications. There are technologies that allows you to remove or move something from one place to another. So all of these things are the things we are going to be learning under networking. So we are going to be looking at that in details as we progress in this our journey. What networks are, we are going to simulate network practically. You see how network works, how the OSI layers. I am talking to you, is going through a network to get to where you are. How is this possible? How does these things work, right? So we have standards and models that have been developed that allows these things to function or to work. We refer to them as the OSI layer and also the TCP IP model. So we're going to be delving into all of these things as we progress. So you must know how network works before you can become a good cybersecurity professional. The last item is instructions and processes. You must know how to issue out instructions. You must know how to allow for processes. You must know how to determine principles. You must know how to structure policies. You must know how to come up with regulations. You must know how to give out instructions, right? For you to practice cybersecurity, for you to become an expert in cybersecurity. Now, when we look at programs, it mustn't really mean that you must know how to write codes, but you must have understanding or a knowledge of what coding is, right? You're not going to be writing code, but you should know what, okay, if this code is here, what type of instruction, what type of rules should I give so that this code does not cause harm to my system? You should know that, right? So when we talk of instructions and processes, and then refer to them as programming languages, we are not just looking at you, going to learn Python, C++, or C#. It mustn't necessarily be it, right? But you must know how to give out instructions. You must know how to speak more than one language. You must know how to talk ethically. You must know how to talk to computers. You must know how to talk to people that are using computers, but they don't speak the same language as yourself. So all of these things are what we refer to as programs. So these are the three major things that you must know how to do for you to thrive in the cyberspace. So for cybersecurity, we have defined it as the ongoing effort to protect individuals, organizations, and governments from cyber attacks. You can also look at this as the countermeasures and controls put in place to protect cyber assets from unauthorized use or harm. We can also refer to it as the practice of protecting systems, network, data from digital attacks, theft, or damage. So if you look at all of these things, just as what we have been discussing, these are all what cybersecurity is all about, right? And all of these things we are looking at, it does not necessarily mean that it is only you that must put in place cybersecurity, right? So cybersecurity can be implemented by the government, it can be implemented by an organization, and also can also be implemented by the people, which is you and I. So by you and I implementing cybersecurity, we need to adopt several hygienes, several cultures, several ethics. We don't just do things anyhow, right? Because we are in the cyberspace to ensure cybersecurity, to protect a particular asset, right? So we need our hygiene, cybersecurity hygiene. We need our culture, we need our ethics, etiquette, regulations, rules, and all whatnot, right? Okay, so at organizational level, so organizations bring in things like policies to guide how we function or how we do things in the organization, right? Organization puts in policies, organization puts in procedures, guidelines on how to do this. That's why you see, you go to organizations, you see things like handbooks, you see things like several policies, cybersecurity policies, you see things like compliance documents and all whatnot. So those are the type of cybersecurity that organizations puts in place. Then for the government puts in place things like regulations, right? They also make us comply to several certain standards. And that is why even as we progress, we'll be looking at standards like the NIST standards, right? We look at several regulations also, like the Cybercrime Act is a law put by the Nigerian government, right? Cybercrime Act of 2015 that is being reviewed in 2024, right? That was being reviewed in 2024, right? So we have that as a law or an aspect of cybersecurity by the government, right? We also have the National Cybersecurity Strategy and Policy document also put out by the Office of the National Security Advisor. That is also a law that governs cybersecurity. So that is the government effort to protect this thing. Organizational effort, we talked about policies and the like. Then the people effort, we are talking about your hygiene, your culture, your ethics, how you operate in the cyberspace. Don't click things anyhow. Don't just visit any website because it is catchy or there's a catchy stuff there, right? You can be baited for that, right? So definitely we'll be seeing some technical aspects of all of these things as we progress. So the key objectives that cybersecurity is trying to achieve is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, these are the three objectives. These are the major things that cybersecurity tries to achieve. Now, note that we have moved a little from the cyberspace and we are looking at cybersecurity now, right? Which is the controls, which is the last part of things that happens in the cyberspace, right? So what does cybersecurity wants to achieve in the cyberspace? To achieve confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are the three major things it wants to achieve. We look at them and we call them the CIA triad. C for confidentiality, I for integrity, and A for availability. So cybersecurity tries to ensure that everything that operates in the cyberspace operates there with confidence. People trust them. It should be trusted that nobody can easily manipulate them. So that is one of the things that cybersecurity is achieving in the cyberspace. The next thing is integrity. It maintains integrity. It tries to maintain integrity of cyber assets, right? That nobody changes anything. Whatever Mr. Peter is saying is what it is, in much as he's using the cyberspace. So if I send this document to the group chat, tomorrow nobody should come and say it is not Mr. Peter that sent it, another person that sends it, right? That's integrity. Then availability. Everybody should be able to have access to all the things that they are supposed to have access to. Everybody should have access to all what they are supposed to have access to. That is availability. So that is what we refer to as a CIA triad. So we want to stop our class here and then take questions. Hopefully I'll drop this material for us. Whenever there are any questions, you can always go ahead, ask these questions, right, in the group chat. So I will always be there to respond to our questions. So let's open the floor for questions and answers, since I've been talking. Okay, Her Excellency, Father Mark, you can go ahead. Time for questions. Questions. Please, let's go ahead and ask questions. Are we saying everything is very clear? Her Excellency says, thank you very much for the material. Okay. Are we saying everything is very clear? If I ask a question now, are we going to be able to answer to them?
Well, to a large extent, on my part, I think everything is quite clear, except for the fact that I don't know which area that distorting network. That's why you see that sometimes we go in and out of the lectures, because
you say you don't know which area. What? Sorry, you say you don't know which area.
The area that there are some areas that one did not get clearly because of the fluctuations of the network, which is as a result of the weather, because it's actually raining heavily. I don't know which region you are, but to a large extent, the ones I listened to, I think I'm 90% clear. I don't know about Reverend Mark, but at the same time, I wanted maybe if you can shed a little more light on the concept of cyberspace, what the cyberspace itself, what it means.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let me take that. Okay, Her Excellency is saying that she actually missed some because of maybe breaking network from her end. Okay, so let me throw a little more light on the concept of the cyberspace. And just like we said, I think the rain has also reached my area. So, well, let me see. I think we can really get this. Now, the cyberspace is an all-encompassing world of its own that allows for information, technology, communication, and interactions. Let me take that again. So it's an all-encompassing world space that allows for information, technology, communication, interaction. Information, technology, communication, and interaction. So these are done through various frequencies. In fact, as a matter of fact, the most used frequencies are our radio frequencies. So these interactions occur via our radio frequencies, but the frequencies are tuned higher than the normal frequency we use for radio communication. So that is why we look at activities in the cyberspace to be inclusive of both things that happen both in our local radio space to the higher frequency space. So at times, some people say that when it gets to the alpha frequency space, now this is a higher level though. When it gets to the alpha, beta, gamma, we have those frequencies. So when it gets to that stage or that phase, that is where the concept of the cyberspace stops. So it starts from basic frequency from 0 to, I think, 3,000 megahertz. So any activity, any form of interaction that happens within that space, we refer to it as activities that happens in the cyberspace. So the cyberspace is a world of its own that allows for information, technology, communication, and interaction. IT communications and interactions, right? So it involves both the infrastructures, both the people, both the information itself, and also the actions, the cognitive actions that happens there, right? So the cognitive actions can be like your binary actions happening between zeros and one, right? Your data moving as zeros and one, electrical signals being converted to zeros and ones, becoming what we refer to as data frames, becoming what we refer to as segments, becoming what we refer to as data, becoming what we refer to as information, becoming what we would now refer to as intelligence. So at all levels of all of these things, we refer to them as cognitive actions. Your program, your instructions are all cognitive actions. The people aspect, we look at them and call them the people, the processes, the culture of the people, the ethics of the people, are also part of it. Then information is also part of it. Then the physical system, which is what most of us refer to as cyberspace, is also part of it. Because it is actually the physical aspect that most of us refer to as IT today, information technology today, right? Because we see them, we see these things physically, we say they are IT. But all of these things put together work together to achieve what we refer to as the cyber space. So it's a domain of its own, a domain where human life exists on its own, an abstract domain. You cannot see it, right? But it is there, it's abstract. So it's an abstract domain. In the military, if we are to do, for instance, if we are training in the military, we don't train them, conventionally as this, like this. So we know that it is a war domain. It's the fifth war domain. It's the fifth domain that war can happen. People can actually fight themselves, in terms of military actions on that domain. That is why somebody can sit in Nigeria and hack the power grid in Finland and shut down the whole function of the smart city in Finland, right? So it's a war. That is why we have things like cyber war, cyber warfare. We have things like cyber attacks before you now move to cyber crime. Although what most times we always look at when we are teaching like this is what we look at and call cyber crimes, because these crimes are always against a person. These crimes are always against an individual's finance, right? So we call them cybercrime. That is what we're always interested in. An organization is always interested in. So it tries to protect its infrastructure against cybercrime, then move to cyber attacks. But no organization will want to protect their infrastructure against cyber warfare. It is the government that want to protect their infrastructure against cyber warfare. And that is why we don't just look at cyber space as just the internet or our IT equipment in the office. So the cyberspace is holistic, it's all encompassing. Whenever somebody calls that word cyberspace, know that it's a world, like it's a domain of life, that life exists. So your smart city is existing in the cyberspace. Your IoT is existing in the cyberspace. Your AI, they are existing in the cyberspace. So all of these things exist in the cyberspace. And that is why cybersecurity, we don't just look at it as security of the networks only. We don't just look at it as security of information only. We look at it as a security that expands more than just information, that expands more than just the cloud, that expands more than just networks, that expands more than just physical, so it's holistic. And that is why as cybersecurity professional, your job role cannot vanish, because as technology keeps growing, so likewise security of those technologies keeps coming. And then you also have other aspects of that security to migrate into. So if we are looking at AI and say AI today, AI still needs security. So who protects the AI? It is the cyber experts. Who protects the IoT? It is the cyber security. That's why you see today people go to do IoT security. You see today people go to do infrastructure security, information security. All of these are because of cyber security. They are all domains of cyber security. I don't know if this explains or gives us more light on what cyberspace is.
It is very clear now. But what can we just quickly just say as the components of the cyberspace? What makes up the cyberspace? From what you have just said, it means that it also includes.
Okay, do you mean the components of the cyberspace?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So the components now, for it to function, for the cyberspace to function, the components that makes it function, that drives it, are your operating systems, your networks, and then sets of instructions, otherwise known as programs. So those sets of instructions can span towards your policies, your programming language, your programs you are writing, those codes they are writing, they are also set of rules. Is that not so? So whether it is policy that organizations are putting in place, they are programs. Whether it is a governance structure that the government is putting in place, they are programs. So this program, the operating system, and then the networks are the component, the key components of what drives the cyber security. Now, the ideologies in the cyberspace are, remember, components are different from ideologies. Ideologies are like the conceptualization of the space. What is the thing that are put together to make up that space? The conceptualization of the space. That is what we refer to as assets, vulnerability, threat, attack, risk, and then cyber security. That's the security itself, which is the control. So the asset, the vulnerability, the threat, the attack, the risk, and the controls are the ideologies in this cyberspace. But what we are keenly interested in it is not the asset, though we'll be looking at all of those things, but we are keenly interested in one of the ideology, which is cyber security, which are the controls, which are the prevention mechanisms, right? So these are the things that we are going to be looking at. And then we also told us of the area that, we have tapped in or we have dragged into cyber security, right? And some of those areas are areas like network security, information security, cloud security, right? All of this physical security also. All of these are areas that we have actually dragged in. We have actually borrowed concepts from them and make them to become cyber security.
Very clear.
Does that make
Thank
sense?
you very much. Can you mute Reverend Mark? I think he does not know that his mic is on.
Yeah, it's okay. He has done well. He has done justice to it.
Okay.
Yeah, because I've been on the road since that time I spoke with you.
Yes, you said so.
So I've been on this lecture. Yes. Thank you very much.
It's all right.
Okay,
You can off your
Thank
mic.
you, Dr. Peter. Thank you, Dr. Wale.
It's all right. It's my pleasure, Doctor. I think that this is very elaborate.
Yes.
Dr. Peter, you have done a very good job today. I actually took my time to listen. And I want to believe there's also cyber peacekeeping. If we can have cyber warfare, right?
Yes, of course. We call it cyber diplomacy.
Okay.
The cyber diplomacy, actually.
We are peacekeepers. We are from the institute, crisis resolution and peace building. Even they call it itself African College of Crisis Management and Peace Building. So we also want to look at those areas where there is cyber peacekeeping or cyber diplomacy, as you have just put it. I think that is going to be the next topic of our seminar for our institute, the area of cyber diplomacy, because we do seminars from time to time.
Of course.
And we will look at cyber diplomacy as the next theme of our continuous membership development training. But this is a very good one.
Of course.
And I think for me, I am very okay for today.
Same here. I'm good.
It's all right. So we allow our lecturer to tell us tomorrow when next, the lecture and the color. So we can.
Okay.
So Dr. Peter, we are waiting for you. The network is also your network is also being affected, I guess.
Not friendly. Thank you. So I will drop the recording on the platform, and please, if there's any questions, let's always endeavor to ask. We are always here to guide us. Thank you, Dr. Wale. Thank you, Father Mark.
Thank you so much, Dr. Peter.
When
Thank
the
you.
video is out on the email, we can put it on the Telegram platform.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you. All right. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.